Thank you, Mark. So this is Mark Britnell on the Not Your Everyday podcast, and I'm really excited about this podcast and this particular episode because Mark's been a good friend of mine for almost like a year now, a year and a half, and I want him to explain who he is and what he does. So welcome to the podcast, Mark. And yeah, what do you do? And yeah, describe yourself.
Well, thank you, Olu. I'm delighted to be on your show today, and you're a great guy. I am the global head of healthcare, government and infrastructure for KPMG International. And KPMG is about 150 years old. We operate in 157 countries. I'm responsible for a division which is the second largest in KPMG. We account for about 22% of all global revenues. 45,000 people work in infrastructure, government and healthcare. So I'm the head of that practice. Personally, I've spent over 30 years being a healthcare professional and healthcare expert, and I've been working for KPMG for 11 years. And during that time, I've had the honor and the privilege of working in 80 countries on 345 occasions. Prior to that, Olu, I was the Director General in the National Health Service. I was once, many centuries ago, decades ago, the youngest Chief Exec of one of our largest teaching hospitals, the University Hospitals in Birmingham. And I started my career many years ago when I left Warwick University. I went to law school and decided not to be a lawyer. Best decision I ever took, and joined the fast track training scheme for the National Health Service. It's called the NHS Management Training Scheme. So I started that in 1989, 1990. So you can work out how old I am, Ollie.
Great, thank you so much. Is there anything else?
No, I mean, my job involves advising, obviously, clients around the world. I fly, before COVID, of course. I was working in about 33 countries per year. We advise governments, we advise not-for-profits, we advise for independent organisations. I spend most of my time working in healthcare, but I also have a reporting line through to the global board to make sure that our development and our growth and our performance is on track. And fortunately, over the last few years, we've run a very successful global enterprise.
How did you find your passion in healthcare? We're going to go to your early years, but yeah, before we go there, maybe explain for people who are trying to find their passion. You know, that's a common question that people have, but everyone has different answers to it. So yeah, how did you find your passion in healthcare or in any other way? And then I'll ask another question about developing.
Yeah, sure. Well, I went to university. I read history. I loved history, still love history. As you appreciate, you know, when you're coming out of university, I went to Warwick University, had a great time at Warwick. I didn't really know what a history degree was going to do for me. And to be honest with you, when I started at university, I didn't care. I just wanted to absorb as much information as possible and play as much football as possible, actually. I got to the, I got elected. I was a sabbatical, so I helped to run our student union for a year. So I did 4 years at university. I panicked a bit, got to the Easter of my final year, and I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. I didn't go on any of the milk rounds where they all come round and, you know, big companies interview you and you interview them. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll carry on studying. I thought I'd quite like to be a lawyer. I'd never really met a lawyer, by the way. I just thought I'd quite like to be one. And that was a problem, because I went to law school and I didn't like it. I'd gone from history, where you thought about the future and there wasn't a definitive right and wrong answer, to sitting back in a classroom at law school where they took an attendance register when you started the day and when you left the day. And I did that for a year and I thought, this isn't for me. And what I I started to reflect on what I like to do, and actually running the student union, I loved running the student union. I love creating things with resources, human resources or financial resources or physical resources. And I just saw an advert in the Guardian, and it said, we want a new breed of manager to help lead the NHS. And I thought, well, I've run the student union. Can it be that different? By the way, it was, but I didn't know that at the time. And then I applied. I was still at law school, going into my second year, because my first year was the law conversion course, because I did history. And I didn't go back. I applied, and I got onto the training scheme, because actually I thought two things, to be honest with you. I'd always wanted to do a job with an absolute unswerving social purpose. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to manage a large, hairy, complex organisation with lots of moving parts. And I found out the hard way that law, sadly, potentially, wasn't going to give me what I wanted. So I made a quick career change. But if you're asking me a question about how I got into healthcare, it's because, you know, the NHS is the most cherished national institution in our country. When, you know, you poll people about what it means to be proud of Britain, the NHS scores more highly than the monarchy, than the armed forces, than our Olympic team, certainly, sadly, than our football team. And it's always been a part of my life. I was instantly attracted to it once I'd worked out that law wasn't for me. But I didn't have much help thinking it through, and that's why I think there wasn't that much help. You know, I think we had a careers officer at university, but I never went. And so I think it was the fact that I'd always wanted to run something big and complex, and that I'd loved the NHS. And how I got to love the NHS, of course, is because everyone's got their own stories, but I had a cousin, Stephen, who sadly at the age of 12 died of cancer, and I was 11 then. And we lived in the Northwest, he lived in North Wales. And I went with him. We were really, really good friends. And I saw the NHS at its best, and I also saw it, sadly, as he died, at its most compassionate. And that stuck with me, to be honest with you. And so I thought, I want to go and help run the NHS. And it was a great decision. So I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, it has. And you said that you came from a poor background, and you worked your way up to where you are now. So maybe briefly, like a minute or so, explain how you developed your confidence. So maybe just talk about your background, and then, you know, what was the moment where you realized that, you know, you could do what you wanted to do, and your confidence started to grow?
Well, that's a really good question, and I've never been asked that question before. And I've had to think about it, because it's not something I have consciously recognized. But I'll tell you when it was, or when it probably was. You know, if you come from a poor background where you're made to queue for your free school meals. So I want to come back to Marcus Rashford in a moment, because I'm a Man City fan and he moved me, and he plays for Man United. I want to come back to him in a moment, because I had a lot of memories, painful memories, watching his social media campaign, because when I had free school meals, they made sure that, just so everyone could know that you were really poor and undeserving, you had to queue outside the headmaster's office every day to get your meal ticket. Can you imagine being that stigmatized? And me and my sister, she used to come with me, and we were young, you know, we were 6, 7, and then all the way through to leaving school. I wasn't naturally a confident person, and my sister, sadly, still to this day isn't, because of the way that you are stigmatized at school, and whether it's because of your race or your sexuality or your economic class, these things have a profound impact on your confidence levels. And sadly, for most people, it's not an experience where they grow, you know, as you know, as people know. And so you got me thinking about this. Marcus Rashford got me thinking about this. And I think my answer is, when I was 12, I lived for football. I was a pretty good player, good sweeper. I was tall, wasn't clever enough, could read the game, so I could play the ball well, and I wasn't afraid of tackling. I say that because basically my life revolved around football, and that gave me a lot of confidence because I knew I could play well. And that gives you a certain amount of street credibility. As you know, if you can play football and you're in the full team, you feel you're a player.
Yeah.
And what happened is I didn't do some homework when I was 12, and I essentially copied out large chunks of my. You heard it here first, Olu. I essentially copied large chunks of my mate's homework out of his book because I hadn't given it in. And funny enough, the teacher spotted it. And I had two English teachers for English language and English literature, Mr. Lacey and Mr. Selby. Mr. Selby and Mr. Lacey. And Mr. Selby caught me. I think he's still alive, actually. I hope he is, because I want to thank him. And instead of giving me a right royal rollicking, he sat me down in this comprehensive school, and he literally sat next to me and he said, "Look, Mark, you know what I'm going to say." And I said, "Yes, Mr. Selby, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I know that you're going to give me a detention and I'm going to have to do the homework again." He said, yeah, you're going to get all of those things. But he said, "Mark, you're better than this." And that was the first time anybody had ever said to me, you're better than this. And I literally went, wow, he thinks I've got something. He thinks I can. And I never looked back. I never looked back. He literally sat next to me, and instead of actually giving me a royal rollicking, he just said, "I know you're better than this." And I just wonder how many people, whether it's about your, being oppressed through your race, being oppressed through your gender, being oppressed through your sexuality, or being oppressed through your class, or all four of those, or your disability, or all five of those, and somebody just saying, "I believe in you." It's very powerful, isn't it? And I think what struck me about the Marcus Rashford campaign, because first of all, it brought a lot of memories back for me, and they weren't good memories. But the way he told his story, without any airs or graces, resonated with a lot of people in society. And of course, the point he's making right now about leaving nobody behind couldn't be more appropriate for the times we live in, because we're not going to be looking forward to a great autumn or winter. It's going to be very hard for our country, and I've always believed in trying to not leave people behind. So that's a very honest answer to your question, and it's the power of. I mean, he wasn't a mentor; he was my teacher. I respected him, Mr. Selby and Mr. Lacey for English, but they believed in me, and I think that's trying to find. That's when I found my confidence.
Yeah.
Because somebody told me I was good enough to be good.
Yeah, and that's all it takes, right? It doesn't need you don't need no magical moment, no big achievement. You just need somebody to just believe in you. And quite often, sometimes we don't recognize that we had that person, or we don't realize that they believed in us, and you took you had the self-awareness to be like, wow, somebody believes in my talent, in my future, and that was the start of your success. So with that confidence and that feeling of I can do it, how did you go through, or like what was the toughest moment in your life where you had to come out of, knowing that you've had a lot of success and you had confidence, but then there was a moment maybe where you felt your real lowest point? How did you come out of that moment, and what was that moment?
Well, my lowest point in my life is when, at the age of 42, I discovered I had prostate cancer, and that was an aggressive cancer. You don't get prostate cancer normally when you're 42. It's highly unusual, and to be honest with you, I thought I was going to die. Of course, you ask the doctors and the surgeons the obvious question: will I live? And of course, they can't give you a definitive answer that you will. They can talk about your success rate and your recovery rates by comparing you to people. But people at 42 don't get prostate cancer, and I found out just by real luck. If I hadn't have found out, I would definitely be dead now, because it was an aggressive tumor coming out of my prostate. It would have jumped out of my prostate and then got into my body, and then it's much more difficult to treat it, and then that leads to obviously to death. So I would say that was my lowest moment, because you even as you recover, there are significant side effects. You're incontinent, you're impotent, and you're infertile. Now, fortunately, 2 of those 3 reversed themselves after time. But I had a small child then, and I was working crazy hours, and I was just feeling really tired all the time. I thought it was because I was stressed and just working, crazy hours. I've always worked very hard, but I felt really tired. And anyway, it got caught in time, and they made the diagnosis. And 3 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I had the surgery. And then I was off for 6 weeks or so, I think, and felt really low about it, to be honest with you. Not only because of the physical effects of having a 5.5-hour operation, which are obviously substantial, but also the effects of coming to terms with losing some of your functionality as a man that is part of your identity, and then trying to prove to everybody that you were superhuman by going back to work as quickly as possible, which quite possibly is the stupidest thing I've ever done. I went back far too early to work, because I thought, work needs me, I need work, I'm important, I'll show them that I can shrug off cancer, that I'm bigger than cancer, I can bear down and face cancer. When in fact, my body wasn't functioning properly. And so that was, I would say, well, obviously personally, and I would say professionally as well, it was a really tough time. And when you think about, when you skirt with death or cancer, it makes you think about your life. And then obviously I decided then, I was Director General in the National Health Service. I decided that just in case I was going to die, or it was going to come back, because they can't tell you it won't come back, but the operation was successful with side effects, but it was successful. I thought, I'm going to do something else. I'm 42. I've had a brush with a significant disease, and that's when I joined KPMG. So I suppose out of adversity, I decided to do something else. And so I'd say my lowest moment became one of my brightest, because it was a rediscovery or a reawakening of life. And then I decided to do something different with my life, and I've seen the world. And as you know, I've written 2 award-winning books that have been translated into 3 different languages. So I feel blessed and lucky, because life is not about the destination. Life is about the journey. And I know that's a super cliche, but I think if I could have a word with my younger self, I would, because I was always driven about the destination, the next job, the next challenge. But I suppose as I've passed into my 50s now, you reflect on the journey as much as you do the various destinations, and it feels good. So I suppose on occasions I would say that even your lowest moments can be turned into a moment of discovery and reflection, and then action. And you just have to be alive to those opportunities and see them as part of a journey, not as a final destination.
Yeah, so that's an amazing story, because you've shown that your lowest moment was your growth moment. And that's what we're trying to explore on this podcast, is how do you grow within those moments? And I guess what changed after that for for you? So you said that you joined KPMG, you went into healthcare. Was there anything else in you as a personal, personally, that made you see life differently? Like you're going to change the way you eat, or you're going to change the way you treat people, or was there anything that made you believe like, okay, I need to do some things differently now that you've had that growth moment?
Well, I suppose lots of people say when they're about to die that they don't remember work, they remember the people they've loved, the places they've been, and the family they care for. And I think for me, I certainly realised, having poured my entire self into the NHS, I realised that I had to protect the security of my family. And personally, I wanted to see the world, because obviously when you come from I didn't get on a plane until I was 21 years of age. We couldn't afford it. I didn't go on any holidays. I went on 2 holidays from the age of 0 to 21. And I thought to myself, while I was lying, recovering from my prostate cancer, I love my child. Then we've got 2. Obviously, had 2. I have 2 now, and I thought I want to see the world before I die. So it's all personal, but I think for a lot of people, I think a lot of people who've had significant illnesses genuinely realise 2 things: what's important to them and who's important to them.
And you were able to make that change. That's
Yeah,
sorry.
I was lucky. I was able to make a change. I had options available to me, but those options wouldn't have been available to me unless I started to think about things in a different way. So I was obviously shunted physically through the operation and the cancer scare into thinking about what's next.
Yeah. And how did the book come about then? Because that's post-cancer as well.
Yeah, well, so then after I had cancer, I decided I joined the board of Prostate Cancer UK, because men don't talk about prostate cancer. It's the biggest or second biggest killer in the United Kingdom. It affects different races. Obviously, particularly black people have a higher incidence of prostate cancer. People who come from poor backgrounds present much later. So it's got all the issues that are close to my heart. And men being men don't talk about things that don't work so well. They're more bashful or private. So I joined the board of Prostate Cancer UK, and then, of course, I then joined KPMG in 2009, and then by 2015, I realised that I was living a very privileged life in the obviously the ability to work around the world. And I thought lots of people, like me before I moved to KPMG, work in one hospital or one region or one city or one health system, and that's all they know about healthcare. And I have always been curious. I've always wanted my intellect, as far as I have one, to take me to new places. I believe in this thing called the dialectic, which comes from a philosopher called Hegel, which is thesis and antithesis clashing to produce a synthesis. And so I like ideas clashing to create new ideas, new light and new energy. And I thought to myself, I'm in a privileged position. I'm going to write a book about all the countries I visited. And then I'd been up to, I think it's about 70 countries. So I decided to take a third of them that I knew really well. And so I wrote about 20 country chapters comparing different countries' health systems, what's good, what's bad, what's up, what's down. And then I looked at 7 tectonic global themes in healthcare, everything from climate change to the workforce. And I wrote it because obviously I donated all of my royalties to prostate cancer, so I wasn't making any money out of it. KPMG kindly allowed me to write the books on planes, trains and automobiles and my weekends. They were very kind that I could spend my weekends writing the book. And people really liked it, because people are curious about what other countries do. And so, but I never thought I could write a book, Olu. If somebody's a working class kid that that basically came from a poor background would have a book that was published and translated into 3 languages that sold in 109 countries, I'd say you've got the wrong man. It's not me. It's not me. We only had 2 books at home, you know. We had the Bible, and it shouldn't happen to a vet, written by a guy called James Herriot, because my mum liked James Herriot. By the way, you won't know him. Neither do I, by the way. But it's funny, isn't it? It's funny what you can do when you think about it.
Yeah.
And then the second book came around, published last year. The first book's called In Search of the Perfect Health System, published by Palgrave Macmillan. The second book is called Human: Solving the Global Workforce Crisis in Healthcare, published by Oxford University Press. And that came out last year and sold out in the first 4 months, the first edition. And I read the second book because I could see this huge crisis hurtling towards healthcare, and I didn't think that anyone was taking it seriously enough. Everyone thought it was a problem, but they couldn't see what I could see, because I could see it happening around the world, and I thought this is a call to arms. And of course, sadly, I've been proved right. Every country in the world now wishes it has more healthcare staff and a more resilient healthcare system, because it helps countries get out of COVID more quickly, and that helps the economy, and that helps people's jobs, and that helps them pay taxes, which in turn helps to support public services. So I feel vindicated, but sadly so, on the second book.
Yeah. Okay, can we just move on to, I want to talk about your personal advice that you can give for people who are going on this personal growth journey. And I guess the question is, why do you think you are where you are today? Was there a particular skill that you had, a particular talent that you had, mentors? What was it that, if you put it down to 1 or 2 things that really propelled you to where you are today, the success that you've had, the books that you've launched, the heights that you've reached? What is it that got you there?
Well, I think there are loads of things, of course. It's a great question, but I'll try and highlight 3. There's a cliche that's, this cliche: the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I think being there and working hard, for me, perspiration has been really important. Staying power has been really important. The second thing is inspiration, obviously from other people, and that means networks. And because I joined the National Health Service Management Training Scheme, we've always had good mentors, and we've had coaches and mentors. Now I realise that not everyone is lucky enough to have a formal training scheme where they can have coaches and mentors, but everyone that works can find mentors or coaches. Don't be afraid to ask, because most people want to help other people. So ask, like you did, Olu. You're punching well above your weight because you had the confidence to ask, and now look what you're doing. So and people might have said no, but not too many, and then you found people that said yes, and so you work with them, and that's cool. And that's what I did. So the second thing is, in terms of inspiration, is find people that are different to you, that will challenge you, and seek their honest support and feedback. And then the third thing is take energy and celebrate from your successes. So in terms of the team that you're working, or whether it's an individual piece of work, or whether it's somebody else's piece of work that you recognize, finding the energy to recognize success, it does breed more success and energy. So, and I know that sounds obvious, but actually it's not that obvious, because people just carry on working without recognizing contributions. And I've always liked to think that I've recognized success. Every organization I've worked for, I drive for its success. I put its success first, and the success of a team first, I hope. So that they would be the 3 things I would say. I would say perspiration, inspiration, and celebrating and recognizing success to give you more energy and momentum. And they're 3 things that I've held on to in my career, and still to this day, the same, I think.
Excellent answer. What advice would you give your younger self?
To smell the roses more. It's about the journey, not the destination. I was always in a hurry, and what I've learned in this job, particularly over the last 10, 11 years, is the journey and taking in the journey, i.e. smelling the roses, is a development opportunity in itself, and it develops you along the way. So I would probably teach myself or tell myself to be less impatient and to enjoy the ride and smell the roses more.
Yeah, that one resonated with me a lot because I'm similar. I kind of work hard, but don't recognize the journey that I'm on, or don't celebrate the journey I'm on. And sometimes just taking that week off, taking that time off to actually reflect on the good work. Because sometimes it feels a bit like arrogance, or feels a bit like you're over above your head, or you're feeling too much. But actually, it's a moment to recognize the work that you put in. So definitely a good advice there. How do you deal with the pressure as a global chairman? Do you have techniques? Do you have ways of dealing with the pressure? Because I think this podcast is about personal growth, and I want to know more about the techniques, the behind the scenes of how you deal with pressure as a global chairman.
Well, as the global head for, we call it IGH, Infrastructure, Government and Healthcare. Even at my age now, I ask for feedback. We, as you know, Olu, you're a great management consultant. You ask for feedback from your team, from your subordinates, from your superiors, and of course from your clients. And although that can feel quite frightening on occasions, actually getting good feedback either in real time or sometimes afterwards with the benefit of perspective, getting feedback centers you and gives you more perspective and balance. So they're the techniques that I try and use. They're not always successful, of course. There are moments, you've just recently helped us help the country and the National Health Service with the Nightingale project in London. And you know how being dropped in a highly pressurized situation can affect your own behavior and your own performance. And personally now how much of an impact your work can make on patients and NHS staff and patients' carers and relatives. And that's very stressful. So sometimes, I suppose what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way, sometimes it's okay to feel stressed as long as you're not permanently stressed. And you just have to put that in perspective. And that's a question of experience and coping mechanisms. So that's a really long-winded answer to how do I cope with stress? Well, I look after myself as far as I can. I try to take feedback and soundings, and I always try to thoroughly prepare. And occasionally you have to recognize that shit happens.
It happens, it does.
And, and then it's about how well you recover from dealing with problems. But that is a normal part of life. And so it's best to view it as a normal part of life, not as something which is personally directed towards you. Yeah. That would be my advice.
Great, thank you for that, Mark. So you mentioned Project Nightingale. Can you talk to us briefly about how that came about and what it meant to you, considering it was you?
Yeah, well, we don't, as you know, we don't normally talk about clients, but this project's been so well publicised in the press and social media that I think the entire country knows about it. I got a call late one Saturday night saying we need to. Can we help? The NHS needs to build field hospitals. The first one would be in London. As you probably remember, this was about the middle of March. It's when the forecasting and the modelling suggested that London would need 6,000 critical care beds. It actually then had about 850, so it was an enormous increase. The capital didn't have enough staff, didn't have enough ventilators. We didn't know whether we had enough oxygen, and we knew that we didn't have enough beds. And of course, I've spent 20 years of my career working for the NHS and the past 11 working for KPMG. So for me, responding to that call was a matter of national honour and pride in serving the National Health Service. I must say, I felt really proud about KPMG as well. Within the space of, we assembled on Sunday. We met the NHS team, which itself was still forming because they'd literally only made the decision over the weekend to go for a Nightingale facility. So we all met on Sunday, and it was quite scary because no one had ever done this before. There wasn't a playbook or a manual, and we brought together in KPMG. We have deep expertise in certain areas, and we brought together logistics experts, IT experts, operational experts, people like me with a lot of NHS and global health expertise. The military were in the room as well as the NHS, the leaders and the clinicians. And as you know, within 5 working days, we'd mobilised, I think, nearly 300 people up and down the country, helping in Birmingham and Harrogate in Yorkshire. But I don't want to overemphasise our role. I mean, the people who were simply magnificent were the armed forces and the military and the NHS staff themselves. And you saw that firsthand. And you're not a healthcare guy, you've got skills from other areas. But they were brought in to support the NHS. So it was hairy and scary, but it was an honour and a privilege to work alongside the NHS.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mark. That's really inspiring, and the role that we played, the role that all the other consultants and all the other third parties played was really inspiring, and it was definitely felt like a moment in need where we helped the National Health Service and the UK respond. So, well done to all of us, I guess. I'm just going to move on to, because you mentioned that you're pre-COVID, you were traveling a lot. And for people who want to become, a future leader, or people who want to be really successful, they always struggle with work-life balance. So, and I know you have a family as well at home. So what would you say to someone who wants to be, a CEO, or wants to be somebody who's really successful?
Be open-minded, be curious, and be adventurous in spirit. And then the third thing I would say, and this is why I think your podcast is so good, and I think the work that you've done helping many with reverse mentoring is so good and pretty cool, is you need good people to help you along the way. Whether it's work or life, you need to know how to look for good people. You need to know how to have good conversations. You need to know how to handle hopefully constructive criticism and accept it's all part of the journey. And I've always managed to do that. But I know, we might talk later on about, how I started, from the school years onwards. And I know a little bit about your story, and you know a little bit about mine. And that doesn't come naturally. People from disadvantaged backgrounds, and I came from a very poor family. I didn't have the confidence to know how to ask the right questions because I'd never met anybody doing a professional job. I mean, I'd met people doing work. My father was a bricklayer, my mother was a telephonist. But I didn't know how to ask the right questions. I didn't know how to carry myself. I didn't know how to present myself. And the reason I'm saying that is because you know that where you end up is a result of where you came from. And therefore it's about the choices that you make. But not everyone gets an equal choice. And therefore, I think the third thing, without trying to sound too corny about it, is knowing how to develop yourself prepares you for big positions in the future. And that's why I say, the second time, I'm not going to flatter you again, but that's why these podcasts and what you're doing in our firm and elsewhere is really important, because confidence is all important in any sport and any profession. And you don't just develop that naturally. It comes through nurture, not nature.
Amazing, that answer. And there's so much that you said there I really want to unpack. Last question. 3 practical tips for personal growth. So this is for people who don't want to ask for permission for mentors or anybody to just say, yes, you can do it. They want to just get on with it. So what would you say as a practical step or advice to go on that personal growth story? So I know one of the moments you had your realizations when somebody told you that you were good enough. So is there any other advice that you would give someone as practical steps to go on that personal growth?
There's 3. Always be more interested in other people's ideas than your own. So actually seek out difference and seek out other people's ideas and learn. I'm curious, I told you, but be curious in other people, be curious in their ideas. So the first thing is take more time to be interested in other people than yourself. You won't go wrong on that, okay? The second thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask somebody. Say you're doing a job, most organisations are big enough to give you a different project. So even if it means you have to work a bit harder, because some people will say, well, I'd like you to finish doing your own job, but ask for different projects. If you're more interested in other people and you see things happening which you're interested in and people doing things which you think are cool, go to your boss or your line manager and say, could I help in this project? I'll do my work and could I help? So the second thing is try new experiences. And the third thing is, I think this issue is, that's why these podcasts are good, I think. Don't be afraid to ask people what their advice is, because most people as I said, I've worked in 80 countries on 345 occasions over the past 11 years. And if I ever was to write a third book, which I'm not going to, it would be about the power of humanity, because it's very easy to get depressed with social media and the news. But by their definition, they are pointing out things that people have done that are wrong, or situations that are bad, or being misgoverned or mishandled. But there is far more decency in humanity than not. There's far more good in people than bad. And there are far more people that want to help you than want to frustrate you and frustrate you. So the third thing I would say is never be afraid to ask, because most people want to help other human beings. It's what makes us human.
Great, fantastic. Really enjoyed that. Thank you, Mark, for being on the podcast. Amazing stories you shared for all of us to learn from. And I think people will take away what they needed from the things that you said. And I hope it's helpful for everybody to kind of reflect on and maybe listen back to this podcast twice, because that's how good I thought it was. And thank you very much for Mark for just taking the time to be on the episode. And I hope that when it comes out that you'll hope I'll send it to you, obviously.
Thank you.
So just thanks.
It's a really good idea what you're doing as well, and thank you for today.
Cool.